Take it.
Okay. So I'll just preamble my preamble, I suppose. Welcome to the June 22nd, 2025 Green Party of Washington general meeting, general presentation here. We're going to be talking tonight with David Doonan and Gabriel Medina, two elected Greens and people who have insights into green politics, what it takes to win a green election, and insights into varying kinds of electoral processes, from mayor, which David was, to a school board, which Gabriel is currently. So we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation and talk to both of our Greens in depth, and hope to find some nuggets of green wisdom that we can all take into our own lives, and perhaps some electoral strategies or thoughts and considerations for potentially our own campaigns or campaigns we might be wanting to help around the country. I don't have a particular agenda tonight, or a set of expectations for what we want to accomplish. So perhaps before we begin tonight and get into the formal thing, we'll go just around the room, since it's a kind of small crowd tonight, and do a quick introduction. Your name, where you are in the state, and maybe why you're here tonight. So I'll start. My name is Margaret Elisabeth. I am one of your national delegates for the Green Party of Washington. I was recently reelected for that position in our spring meeting last month, and I'm happy to be here tonight to facilitate this meeting with us and with all of you. And so I'm going to pass it to David, and go ahead, David. Tell us about yourself a little, and then we'll go to Gabriel and everyone else.
Sure, thanks. My name is David Doonan. I am living in the Village of Greenwich, New York, which is midway between Montreal and New York City, and roughly midway between Saratoga Springs, New York, and Arlington, Vermont. Very much a rural county. Our county has no 4-lane roads. And I served the mayor as from 2008 to 2016. And that's good for now. Over.
Cool. Thank you, David. Gabriel, what about yourself? You are muted.
Am I muted? Am I muted now?
No,
Am I
you're
good?
good now.
Okay, cool. That always gives me the slip ups sometimes with this Yeti mic. But hey, everybody, my name is Gabriel Medina Martin Ruiz, but you can call me Gabe. And I am located in the central coast of California, smack in between Santa Cruz and Monterey, in this little rural place, just like David is, where we have huge agricultural industry. So we got Driscoll's Giant Berry, Martinelli's apple cider right in our backyard. So I tell people, when you eat any of those berries or drink any of those things, you're having a little taste of my hometown, where we're known as the salad bowl of America, which is crazy. And I just found that out recently. So that's a little bit about me. I'm currently a PVUSD school board trustee member, and I actually won my race last year in 2024 when I was running up against a Trump Republican. So it was great to hear the community receive a green, because I know that was a little bit on the back of my mind as I was getting ready to launch my campaign. So, and I'm happy to get into it with everybody, and just really happy to be here with everybody.
Cool, thank you. All right, so let's go to Scott.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Loganauer. I'm with the Green Party of Washington. I'm a voter in Eastern King County, and served the state party as deputy treasurer. And last year, I served the national party on the coordinated campaign committee. I've run for office a few times myself, and candidacies are, in my opinion, are one of our major catalysts for party growth. And last year on the CCC, I was part of one of a group that spearheaded the change in the mission statement for the Coordinated Campaign Committee to focus on local and state candidates. So I'm thrilled to be here with David and Gabe today. And I'm kind of a self-appointed mentor for state and local candidates in Washington. So any fellow Green Party of Washington members who are interested in running for office, especially statewide or local, love to be in touch and follow up with you there. Thank you. Over. And can I hand it on to Lisa?
Yeah, of course.
Hi, everyone. I'm treasurer for our state party and interested in supporting candidates, and happy to be here.
Thanks, Lisa. Let's go ahead and take it to Ellen.
Okay, I'm Ellen Feeney. I'm down in San Diego, but I'm here to learn and to listen to what's happening in Washington.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us tonight, Ellen. And let's go to Margaret.
Oh, hi, my name is Amber. I'm Margaret Amber. I always go by Amber. And I'm here just to listen and learn about greens from all over the country. I moved here from Minnesota and now I live in Seattle, Washington.
Oh,
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. And Cheryl, how are you tonight?
I'm very good. My name is Cheryl. I lived in Washington last year, and I'm going through the hiccups of changing my ID to Idaho. So I'm kind of in between, last year, unfortunately, they're doing the MRS check in Idaho. Yes, I'm up against that wall. And yes, I don't like it. So so I need that information in order to vote. So I had not changed my driver's license to Idaho, so I'm still in between. Technically, I could register to vote in Washington. Yeah, but the reason I'm associated with this party is because I've always voted for a Green Party candidate. Ralph Nader since about since the time I was 18. I'm getting old, so I don't remember the date. Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us tonight. And Starlene, how are you tonight?
Oh, I'm pretty good. Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, I'm Starlene Rankin. I'm in South King County in Kent, and I am with the state, work with the state party and political organizer. And with Margaret, I'm also a delegate for the national party for Washington Green Party, and happy to be doing all of that work. Yeah, I kind of sort of organized this thing tonight, so I'm really glad you're all here. And I think it'll be a really interesting evening. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Thank you, Starlene. Let's see. No. Alice. Alice, I see you there. How are you tonight?
Good. Hello, folks. I'm in Seattle, Washington. I've been a member of the Seattle Green Party since about 2016, but I started hanging around 2013. And right now I'm the secretary of Seattle, Washington, and a chapter. And I'm interested in education from the perspective of a school nurse, but I'm just recently retired, so I'm interested to hear what y'all are talking about. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Alice. And let's go to Roberta. Thanks for joining us tonight. And you don't have to come on and talk if you don't want to, if you don't feel comfortable doing so. So there's no worries there.
Hi, I'm Roberta. I'll unmute, but I'm not going to show my picture. How's that sound?
Perfect.
I'm in Vancouver, Washington. I just really started learning about the Green Party, I guess, a little over a year ago. Very interested in learning more. Everything seems to be exactly what I'm looking for. As Jill would say, the duopoly is outdated, has been for a long time. And so, yeah, I'm glad to be here and interested in learning.
Cool. Thank you for joining us tonight. And indeed, it is quite outdated. And Malik, how are you tonight? No pressure to come off mute and say anything if you don't want to. No worries there. And of course, everyone, you can always, I'm pointing with my finger at the chat button, like you can see what I'm pointing at. Nevertheless, I'm pointing at it and you can use the chat button to chat in the chat and talk with folks too during our normal presentation. So no worries there. All right. Thank you for everyone for joining us tonight. I'm happy to been asked to help facilitate our discussion. So it'll be pretty free form, as we sort of alluded to at the beginning of our conversation this evening. We're going to be talking to both David and Gabriel about things which are going on both in their local space right now and in an historic sense about elections they've run, how they got to where they are, and just generally speaking, green politics around the education frame and how that plays in different parts of the country. Interestingly enough, both of them are rural candidates, so that is a different. Let me caveat this. I live in the city, and as a consequence, what concerns people have in the city around education issues generally mirror the same ones people have in rural areas, but they do differ in some pretty significant areas. And as a consequence, you see funding differences directed towards different activities. And I think that is a really interesting space to explore, like why those differences exist, how we can level that playing field and make sure our kids get equal opportunities and equity in all of their aspects. So I have no particular order I'm going to go in. So I'm gonna roll a die. I have one right here. You probably didn't think I did, but I do. It's a D30. I'm going to roll it, and if it's a 16 or higher, I'll start with Gabriel in my. You can't see the roll, but it's a 4. So we're going to start with David tonight. David, so thank you for joining us. I have worked with you for many years now, and it's been a very pleasant relationship. If many of you don't know, David is also at the moment the GPUS, which is Green Party of the United States, webmaster and data guru for all of our backend stuff in our IT department. So as a consequence, if you worked at the national party level, you've interacted with David at some level more than once, many times probably. So David, I know you've been a Green for many, many years now and have held office, which is why we're going to talk to you tonight. But before we talk to you about your run for mayor, I want to ask you a bit of a more personal question, if I may, to start our conversation. So, you're a grandfather.
Yep.
And you've got some cute little grandkids running around at home, and I've been seeing some pictures that you've posted, and I know that you've been going through a lot of personal challenges and things. So I wondered if you could maybe give us a perspective of what it's like to be like actively engaged in the Green Party at this professional level and still engaged in your healthy, wholesome family life in that very full way that you do. How do you balance your time between your volunteerism and your family? Like, how do you prioritize these things?
I don't know. Let me put it like this, Margaret. In August of 2001, I walked away from a full-time job to become a stay-at-home dad and began a career as a freelance web developer. So ever since then, every day is different. I wake up, I have a plan of what I'm going to do, but it doesn't always work out the way I want. What else can I put? Well, over there, if I looked out my window, if it was daylight, I could look across the street, look through 3 backyards and see my son's house where 5 of my grandchildren live. One just graduated from high school. There's a 5-year-old granddaughter and triplets who are going to turn 3 at in just a couple of weeks. How do I balance stuff? That's a good question, Margaret. Because quite often I'll be sitting here working away the ideal of I'm going to work 8, 10, 12 hours today. And then I got a text from my son, "Hey, Dad, I need help." And so I just drop what I'm doing, go around the corner and babysit for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then come home and keep working or pick up what I missed. I love those little kids. I can't tell you how much I love them. And obviously, I started doing all this Green Party and political stuff long before even our boys were born. But it's so satisfying to be doing what I'm doing to try and make a better world, not just for the world at large, but for our family. It's very heartening. And regarding education, right across the street, this direction, is the middle school. Behind that is the elementary school, and then behind that is the high school, junior high and high school. So I'm really involved with the local school system, picking up our granddaughters and watching what they're doing and paying attention. And, it's a good school system. It may not be perfect, but it's really served our kids well. And I think I've rambled enough now. Over.
That wasn't rambling at all, and I appreciate it. I have struggled too with balancing, life with party activity, especially as it feels to me personally like the situations around us are escalating in intensities,
Mhm.
and the sort of dire nature of things becomes more apparent, and it feels like we have less and less time to take action. It is the challenge, I think, for a lot of us in this space to balance that, because otherwise we'll end up burned out. And
Sure.
and so one of the things, David, I want to ask you about too, and this is just sort of like an off the generally top of my head thing that I'm always curious to know about candidates who have run, is like at some point you were sitting there by your, like in your house, and you were thinking of some situation that was unfair and you didn't like, and something made you decide, now is the time I'm actually going to stand up, put my hand up and say, elect me. What was that? What was there, a specific thing? Was it an event or a series that took place? Like, why did you decide to put your face to the public and say, give me your best shot?
Okay, I can give you the specific moment, but you need a little bit of background.
Okay.
Okay,
Background.
in God, I forget what year it was, but around 2004 or something like that, there were a number of us who got together who were trying to create a local Green Party in southern Washington County where I lived. And we met a number of times and nothing really came off. But then I saw that Ralph Nader was coming to speak in Glens Falls, about 30 miles north of us. So I went up, met some local Greens, and that's when I really began to get involved. Came across Green Pages, which was being distributed in a local coffee shop. And then through them began going to some of the local or the state Green Party meeting, the Green Party New York State meetings. That's how I began to get involved. But why? And through that, I started to attending some of the local monthly meetings for the village board and the town board. I just wanted to see what was going on, what the current issues were. And then I made the mistake of going to listen to Ralph Nader speak too many times. Every time I saw him, he spoke about the importance of citizen engagement at the local level, about how important that was. And after the last time, I said, if I'm worth this small group of people who are trying to build a Green Party, then I have to run for office. I have to put myself forward. Spoke to a friend of mine who is a current trustee on the village board and said, I'm thinking about running for trustee. And Timmy said, no, 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 you need to run for mayor. So he's the one that talked me into it. And that's kind of just why I did it. I felt a sense of obligation and guilt tripping from Senor Nader. Over.
Gotcha. Well, I think that I'm glad that Ralph made you feel the pressure to get engaged, because that's been a beneficial thing for all of us. I think that, of course, having elected Greens is a very, very good thing, and all of us doing our best to make the country a better place is a collective good. So thank you for that. I want to shift the conversation over to.
Can I add one thing real quick?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm in an unusual position for most Greens in that I'm far more involved with the national party than I am with the state party. Part of that is because the time commitment to get done what needs to be done for the national party, and also because I live 45 minutes or more away from any place the local Greens meet. And most meetings will last, say, like maybe an hour. And then with my commute, I'm spending an hour and a half back and forth going to a brief meeting. So I'm just far more involved at the national than the state level. Over.
Thank you. I was going to actually bring us around to that in just a moment in our conversation, but I want to.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I wanted to bounce over to Gabriel and Gabriel, I wanted to ask, so you're in the salad bowl. Like I didn't know that was the collective name of the area either, but it makes sense to me given how much of our agricultural products come out of the California Valley. So you're a recently elected school board member, and you, as you mentioned in our brief conversation at the beginning of the show tonight, you had run against a Republican. And I'm going to ask you the same basic question that I asked David here. So at some point you were sitting at home and something happened and it decided, like, outside of you believing in the cause, now you're going to put your hand up and you're going to stand for election. Do you remember what that was? And like, what was the catalyst that drove this for you?
Oh yeah, I definitely remember what it was. I had just graduated from my master's program. I came back home and there was this huge discussion going around about ethnic studies. And there was a small group that was claiming that it was anti-Semitic, and they were just halting a lot of the curriculum. My area is 80% Latino. So they were essentially being denied their education or their right to learn about where they're from, because the folks were saying that there's too much of a connection between colonialism and what we experienced and what's going on in Palestine right now. And that did not sit well with me, as somebody who's first, to go to college to get my master's degree in my family. I see the value in knowing about my culture and who I am. And I don't think that we have to go to these 4-year institutions or even community colleges to learn about who we are, where we're from. And that really motivated me to get out there, because the person that was sitting in this seat just really did not want to go that route. He wanted to keep it at straight American history, no outside sources. And for a community that's predominantly Latino and Chicano, we need to be fighting for these things like we did during the Chicano movement. So that was my call, and it just really brought me into the arena of running. And also I work with a lot of students. I do a lot of film education. So I just saw these programs that these students wanted just getting cut left and right. And I just sat down with myself and I said, you know what, Gabe, you were always very vocal, and you're very well educated, you know how to speak to people, and you have students that are literally crying out for help because the board of trustees isn't helping them or isn't listening to them. So I spoke with students and I said, okay, I am down to run this campaign as long as you all are there to help and support me run this. So I had to just make that connection with the students, because they were the ones that were really getting their education derailed. And I knew that I had to step up and do something about it.
That's a very personal connection to the motivation to run, and I certainly appreciate that. I'm curious, was your opponent a long-term incumbent, and if so, how? So you were obviously coming out there with a very different message regarding education than your opponent had, and obviously it was well received. But I'm guessing in some places it wasn't. And so my question to you is in that regard. When you talk to people who were your opposition, were you able to overcome their objections to your vision? And if so, how did you do it? Was there any strategy? Did you have like a specific tactic you went to each time? Like what was your jam?
Yeah, so when I was going out there, we highly lean, the Latino Chicano population leans Democrat. And a big question that I was asking is, why do we keep voting these people in, especially in rural areas where we haven't seen a huge significant change? My community has yet to have any infrastructure coming in, right? We have broken roads, we don't have sidewalks. And if you cross the bridge into Santa Cruz County, they have everything that you could imagine: sidewalks, clean roads, street lights, and it's completely different. And I represent a small slither of that. So when I was going around talking to folks, this was the messaging that I got, because my community had just gone through the Pajaro floods. We had a breach in our levee, and it completely flooded the entire area. And the leadership, especially the person that was sitting in that role, the incumbent, did not make the effort to reach out to the community, to go and speak with them, to see what their needs were, to really fight for them, and and FEMA and the county, and to get those resources to the community. And they really felt that. So when I went around, I would tell them like, hey, my name is Gabe Medina. I'm running for board trustee. And a lot of the times they would ask, oh, are you a Democrat? And I'd say, oh, no, I'm not a Democrat. And they're like, oh, a Republicano? And I said, no, I'm actually a Green Party member. And this is why I'm a Green, because the Democrats and the Republicans are failing us, right? The Democrats say they want to get infrastructure done in our community and to really support our educators in raising the wages for our teachers who are overworked, yet we don't see those things delivered. And then when you look at the Republican side, we did have a few business owners that leaned Republican, but just because they thought that they owned a business, it was better for them to vote for Republican. And I said, absolutely not. The Republicans may run on that message, but what they're really trying to do is give more tax breaks to the rich. That's what they want to do. So if we don't tax these people who are making high incomes in our community, we're never going to get that levee breached. We're never going to get the resources that we need into our county. And that really resonated with a lot of people, that I was outside the duopoly, and I really criticized both parties because historically we've been neglected by both of them. And I think that message resonated with a lot of people as I was doing my campaign.
Very cool. Thank you. Just as a follow-up, has the levee been fixed?
The levee is patched up right now. And we were warned about the levee breach about 2 years prior to it actually being breached, and it was the fault of the county because they didn't see that this was a necessary investment into our area. And they came back, they started giving apologies, but they never wanted to admit what they had done. And that was something that I had to drive home during the campaign as well. It's like, they're going to tell you they didn't know, but look at the meetings that they had. They knew that this was going to be breached, and it displaced about 500 of my students, families. Some of them have yet to get any money from FEMA. We're still waiting on $10 million from them, and I don't hear people advocating or prior to me coming into this seat for those resources.
Thank you very much. There's a lot going on in your area, and reaching outside of the education sphere to advocate for those things is clearly beneficial. David, when you were running for mayor, presumably there was an incumbent there at the time, and I'm going to guess he wasn't a Republican, but maybe he was. So if your guy was a Democrat, I'm just going to presume for the structure of this question, how did you then advocate against a Democrat while you're agreeing? Were you going in more like progressive policies, or were you kind of pointing up places where like the Democratic Party had fallen down, like on anti-war positions and stuff like that?
Completely different situation. The previous mayor, who was a Republican, had decided not to run for re-election, but to run for a trustee position. And one of the trustees, who was Republican, decided to run for mayor. So it was one-on-one. And and the board at that point had one Democrat, everybody else was Republicans. Village elections in New York can be either partisan or nonpartisan. In Greenwich at that point, and still today, they're nonpartisan, but I made it clear to everybody that I was a member of the Green Party. Campaigned either with the Green Party sweatshirt or a button or something like that, and all the local questions to the local media all indicated that I was a member of the Green Party. I'm not sure what else to answer.
Well, let me then ask you, I'm going to ask both of you this sort of like an environmental question.
I know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of acted as if I had already been elected during the campaign. I knew we needed money for a new firehouse. So it was really critical. So I met with a representative, our local congressperson, to find out where I could go to for inexpensive sources of funding for that. I also approached all the other candidates. There were 2 of us running for mayor and 6 people running for 2 trustee positions. It was the most heavily contested election in decades. But I got them all to agree to participate in a candidate forum at the local high school, not a debate, a forum where everybody can make opening statements and then questions from the audience and then closing statements. To my surprise, everybody agreed to that, and that I turned it over to the school and they had their history students actually run the forum. And I did this because there is no League of Women Voters in Washington County. And I think it was that forum helped bring me a good part of the way to actually getting elected.
Nice.
Yeah.
So basically you organizing a public space for all of the candidates to speak, and you were able to advocate for green views enough that it convinced the voters, who were overwhelmingly Republicans, apparently, to vote for you. So good job.
Yeah, thank you. Although we have to remember Little Greenwich where I live is different. The village and town now are have almost solid Republican members on both boards, but the county is heavily Republican. And in fact, our current congressperson is the beautiful, illustrious Elise Stefanik.
Wow.
How many people live in
The
your
village is about 2,000. The surrounding town's about 5,000.
Gotcha. And Gabriel, how big is your place?
My place spans, so I'm in 2 counties for my seat. So I'm in the Monterey County, and we have, I want to say, about 5,000 to 6,000 constituents in my area.
Right on. So all right, so that's a lot of people. And as I sit here and think about the 2 perspectives that you've both offered, one thing that is striking to me, and I think this is the thing which is imperative for grassroots campaigns in particular, is the direct engagement with people, getting out into the community, knocking on the door,
Exactly.
so to speak, and talking to them directly, going out to the farmers markets or wherever it might be, and just speaking to people. I know there is a tendency for us to do a lot of messaging and like media spaces and stuff, and that is useful, but honestly speaking, I've done a ton of candidate interviews. Every candidate who has been successful, one of their go-to things that made them successful was engaging in the community in whatever way they did it, right? Knocking on doors, hosting a community forum, that kind of stuff like that. There's like an old adage, I guess, for politics, like all politics are local. So if you want to win an election, pick one local issue that everyone's complaining about and then promise to fix it. It's harder to do in a big city because there are many issues which many people want addressed, and sometimes they conflict. And so when you have a smaller space, I feel like maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems as if it would be easier to pick one of those issues and like make that a core campaign, like, slogan. So as a consequence, that's my question to both of you. Did either of you have like a core campaign slogan that was the thing you said, right? That's what your campaign was known for. And Gabriel, let me just ask you first.
Yeah, I mean, my slogan was Medina for PVUSD, and and joining a lot of forums is really what I think really did it, because my opponent did not show up to any forums. So, and as somebody who's into media, I went to UCLA and I studied propaganda manipulation techniques, and also, media representation of Chicano and Latino communities. So when I was going through this, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's not showing up. So that gives me leeway to tell my story and not let him tell the story about me. And instead, I got to reverse that. I got to say, look, I'm not going to be that type of person that's not going to show up for you like this person is. So I was literally talking to an empty seat most of the forums. He did not show up to one. And I think that's where I was able to get a lot of messaging out. And similar to David, we had multiple forums with independent candidates and one Democratic candidate who's more leaning like social, a Democratic socialist. So, you know, and the Republicans refused to show up to any of the forums, which said a whole lot about them. And that gave us room to really tell the story, not only about ourselves, but about them and what the future could look like if you do continue to support this person.
To be honest with you, it does feel like it's easy to win a debate when the opponent doesn't show up.
It is. And I wanted to debate him so bad. I even told him, you name the place, location, I will be there. Nothing from him, just silence.
Goodness. So David, did you have a central message for your campaign?
Yeah, a couple messages. The existing board at the time had made a number of decisions kind of behind closed doors. And people didn't know about it until suddenly things began to happen that they were very upset about. So I ran on a slate with two other people, both Democrats, and we named ourselves the Open Government Party, which kind of blew it right in their faces as to who we were, where were we coming from. I really also heavily focused on the need for a new firehouse. The building we had was built in the 1840s and then expanded in the 1860s. And at some point around 1950, 1960, they decided to cut holes in it to make more room for the apparatus. But when they did that, they never did any stabilization. So there were bricks falling out of the building. You could see it was tilting and leading. So that was the main focus I had. The village had also sort of behind closed doors made a deal with a local hospital to swap properties on a parcel in the Main Street downtown. And they were going to build a firehouse there, but then the hospital went out of business and that ended that. So I talked about finding a way to utilize that property in the best possible way to get us a firehouse. We had 3 failed referendums where the public voted them down. And then we decided to do a vote just amongst the board to do a private build. That failed because of a tie. And then working with the attorney, who's a great guy. And that's also one of the other things I did before I ran. I had decided to fire the village attorney and I found his replacement before I was elected. That was like the smartest thing I could have done. But anyhow, we found a way using some financing issues that was legal. But the property the village had bought that they wanted to build the fire department on, we in turn sold that to the YMCA to put a brand new facility on, and then use that along with the money we already put aside to put the new firehouse up on a lot in a residential area of the village that had a building that we had to demolish because it was unsafe, and we took that through eminent domain. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is the focus was open government, getting the firehouse built, and then trying to bring new industry into the town. And that happened through the Y coming in, and I was also able to recruit a craft brewery, opened up a facility on Main Street, and has been just wildly successful. Over.
Awesome.
Thanks, David.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please.
Awesome. Yeah. So Some of my campaign platforms that I was running on, I think the most popular one that I had was lowering the voting age to 16 for our high school students. And one of the reasons why that was so popular is because I represent such a mixed status community. You know, a lot of the gente that I represent are coming from Mexico. They follow the crops. And one thing that I notice is they don't really get a big say in what's happening with their students' education. So one thing that you know, that I was pitching is if we lower that voting age to 16, that allows those parents who aren't able to vote in our trustee elections, that would put it on the student, right, to represent that household and cast that vote. And also, when we turn 18 and go out to vote, when do we get taught how to do that? We don't, right? And this next generation is so active. That's why I love Gen Z, because they are out, they are marching, and they are such a smart and informed generation. I see a lot of like, I would say like older folks, you know, who are not within that millennial Gen Z space, really talking down to a lot of students. And I think that's one thing that I didn't want to do, because I was that student that was talked down to by trustees telling me that, oh, you don't know what you're doing, you're just a kid. So that was a big thing that I wanted, is to lower the voting age. And the second thing was, of course, ethnic studies, bringing that contract back, which we did. And another one that really stood out, especially in my community, was transportation. Schools run by ADA, which is average daily attendance. So you get money every day, right, that your student is showing up. But in my area, we have bus cancellations like every other day. So students whose parents go to work at 5 in the morning to pick the crops have to get a phone call saying that their student isn't, or their child isn't getting picked up, right? And they have to leave work, come and take them to school. Some don't even have transportation to do that. And if you're in the rural area, you know how long it takes a bus stop just to land in our spot. So that was another thing that, you know, was really bringing up my campaign, because I'm in an area that's been so neglected for so long. And when I finally came in and said, these are the things that we should be doing, that really motivated people to come out and vote and even just help out with my campaign. So I like to say that I run on like populist, you know, platforms, not only for students, but also for parents as well. And I think that really helped out the campaign.
Thank you for that perspective and that information. So we're talking about education tonight and education reforms in general and the Green Party stuff. And so my question to you now is around educational systems. So as we know, there, like, our public education system is currently under threat by the federal government, of course, defunding education programs all across the country, which mainly hits disabled students and special needs students who are primarily supported by federal funds, and local students are primarily supported by property taxes. So we can see that, like, the federal government is really targeting a very marginalized community already with very specific targets, and things like buses will be impacted directly. So special needs kids will have harder access to school and activities and things like that. So my question to you then is something along the lines of, what sort of alternate education methods have you thought about? Do you advocate for things like Montessori or like homeschooling? What other alternatives do you think are good? What do you advocate for? And how do you see that integrating into your like green philosophy?
Yeah, so I have a very different take from the traditional school system. I think we're in school too long, especially for this next generation of students whose attention span is a lot, you know, smaller compared to other generations, just because they absorb so much media. So what I'm trying to get the schools to do is kind of take that media aspect and make it fun for them. If they could find a course online on YouTube and just watch that video and learn the material, we're not doing justice to our students. We need to do things that are out of the box and different. So one thing that I'm happy that we just passed is I have a lot of students who come that are seasonal, right? Because they're following the crop with their parents. So with those specific students, they're enrolling in one school for 3 months, in another school for 3 months, in another school. And it really doesn't help with the social aspect, with the learning aspect, consistently getting retested when you already been tested at the past two prior schools. So what we did was we launched the virtual academy. And what this is allowing for is students to stay with us no matter where they are at. They get to take this virtual academy. It's like an online class, essentially. And you check in every week, you get the material, and you get your credits no matter where you're at. So this helps our students who are consistently traveling and come back to us about 8 or 9 months later, right, and miss that whole gap. Now we're filling that with the virtual academy. Another thing that I'm really trying to do to kind of just bridge the how we're looking at education is if we stick to 4 days of academics and 1 day of fun, we need a day of fun. I see just us in four walls every single day. Yet, you know, we have such amazing artists, athletes who just need that 1 day that isn't so academic. Because if you're somewhere for 8 hours, right, sitting down, putting all that attention in, by the time you get to Friday, everybody's burnt out. Even the teachers are burnt out. So one thing that I proposed is going to a 4-day school week with the last day being strictly activities where we bring in the community to run different programs, workshops. At the same time, the teachers could actually get a day of prep. Because if they're in school and they're on prep, usually what happens is they get pulled to another classroom to sub in because that teacher isn't there, right? So we need the teachers off the campus to have their prep time where they're not getting bombarded by questions or admin telling them they need to do X, Y, Z. So that's kind of my framework for looking at it and kind of pivoting us towards this almost like a community college model where students get to choose when they could come. Because right now we're seeing a lot of youth work and they're having to decide between, do I go to work or do I contribute or do I get an education, right? And that's where they're being pulled right now. So I'm also trying to get the school to get paid internships for our students so they don't have to make that choice between getting an education or helping their parents pay rent.
That's a tricky
brilliant.
place to be, no doubt about it. And those are very significant educational challenges, especially for students who travel from school district to school district throughout the year. As a kid who moved a lot, as a young person, I felt that same challenge. Every time I would go to a new school, I had to do all the testing all over again. And then I would feel completely ostracized, didn't know anyone. And then within 6 months, it's moving to the next school and doing it all over.
And I'm a social homie, right? Like I love
Yeah.
to socialize with people, and it was so hard just making new friends all the time.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And David, I presume like as you were talking earlier at the start of our conversation, you can see like out your windows, like the schools next to you that we're talking, like the educational institutions. So my question to you here is like in the position twofold, I guess, from two perspectives. Number one, as mayor, you made a lot of changes for the city and you fixed up the fire department and that was great for the whole village. And so how did that translate into then supporting the education system, supporting the students coming up in that rural town? And then number two, here you are some years removed from that position and you have a chance to reflect and look back at the history of your effort. And if you're sitting here now, what's your judgment? What grade do you give your effort on all of that?
Well, the one thing I tried to do specifically with the school system, we had a number of discussions also with the town about trying to move towards installation of a solar assembly. We had one built on the village water plant, but the school system owns a large parcel of property way behind them. And so we had discussions about what we could do to combine forces between the school and the village and the town to apply for funding to actually make that happen. We were all interested in it, but it never happened. In part because where that parcel was located, that would have been ideal for like this 10, 15, 20 acre solar array installation. It was too far away from a road. And so the connection cost from the array to the main line would have been just prohibitive. So that was really the big thing. When we truly tried to make that happen, we just couldn't.
Gotcha. And so, like, so then if you were giving yourself a grade for that effort, how would you grade over time how it worked out?
A C or a D.
Gotcha.
I mean, we put the effort in, but it didn't never progressed anywhere to the point where I hoped it would. A couple of local families heard about what the three of us were trying to do and approached me, even though they didn't live in the village, they lived in the town, about possibly adding solar arrays on their properties. And I put them in touch with people and it never happened, which was unfortunate because they lived right on roads where it had been a really easy, simple connection to the grid. But there was two elderly couples and they just ran out of oomph for it, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Of course, we're Greens, so I presume all generally speaking in favor of alternate energy sources and clean energy efforts. So it is, a thing we do here in Washington as well, like solar panel engagement. We being Green Party of Washington have a solar panel on a farmer's market. They sold, like, the farmer's market has a bunch of solar panels and they sold them individually to groups that you could sponsor essentially. And so we have one and our name is on it, right? And I think that's a pretty cool idea for schools, for any kind of facility that needs like a power source pretty directly. These days, maybe it was the case, David, when you were mayor, that solar technology wasn't as easy to implement as it is today. And today we know it's much easier. Like, we have photovoltaic window panes, even like you can just, like normal windows, and generate electricity off that. And so I think that we're at a new era of like clean electricity, but there's so much dependence on the easy, cheap electricity from dirty fuels that it's hard to like switch to the more expensive, at least initially, clean fuels. Right? They get cheaper over time as more of us adopt them, the price comes down, but the initial adoption rate is kind of expensive, right? But this is a big deal for us. Like, that reduces the cost of our education facilities, and that gives us the money then to do the special programs, to do the other things that the federal government funds are taking away. Gabriel, I see you're pretty eager to add something here, so go ahead, please.
Yeah. So my constituents, my area was impacted by the Moss Landing fires that happened. So those lithium fires that were running, lithium can't be burnt out with water. So we had to let that taper down. And my schools were impacted by that. One of the schools that I was talking about earlier who went through the floods, some of those rooms in the library did not have a window when those fires were starting. And the only messaging that my district sent out was, hey, everybody, go ahead and just close your windows, it'll be fine. And I literally had to remind them, my staff and students at my school do not have windows right now. I'm getting people reporting headaches. I'm getting people saying that they do not feel well. And I always have to balance these things too, because I wanted to shut down the schools and say, everybody stay home. But in doing that, I knew that some of our students would not have their parents at home because they were at work in the fields. So I told them we need to keep some of them open for our students who need that service. And if you could stay home, great. But if you can't, let's let them go to the schools, and I say, people see school board positions like as a first stepping stone to like a bigger political career. I've never had that mentality. I'm like, no, we're gonna focus on this now. Right? I don't have these aspirations. I aspire to have my constituents heard and listened to. That's what I aspire for. So even environmental impacts like lithium, where we thought it was going to be safe, it impacted us and our constituents and our students. So even looking at hydro renewable energy or air, right? There's so many different ones that are out there that we could look into. And us being on the Central Coast, we have the power of the ocean right next to us. So if we could look into those types of things, that would not only create jobs, but we could also create programs in the schools that are directly giving those students training to be able to graduate with their high school degree and go right into the workforce. Because another thing that's happening right now is, do I go to a 4-year and get in debt? Do I go to a trade school? Do I go to a 2-year? So a lot of students are weighing that right now, and a lot of them are actually choosing to go to work. So if we could combine renewable energy with job creation and create curriculum for the schools, I think we're going to have a really good, a class of students who are able to perform and work at these jobs.
This is the ultimate hope, I guess, of the Green New Deal. Right, like green energy and jobs around
Yes.
green energy. And I think that it is a bit of an aspirational document, sure, but I also think it's a very, very practical and step-by-step plan of how we can transform the situation that we're in. And I know, like, I read a statistic, perhaps it's not accurate, but I read that roughly 40% of America's school children rely on going to school, not for their education, but for their food, for
Yes.
breakfast and for lunch. Like, the fact that we have so many kids who are food insecure and rely on school to get food is, of course, a massive problem. And our schools shouldn't be in the business of feeding children. That's not their job. Their job is to educate them. The food should be free. And in many cases, it's not. Kids have to pay for it. One of the things I remember very, very distinctly is moving to the United States and not understanding that I had to buy food at school. It wasn't the case where I grew up that was how it was. And so I went there and I didn't have money. I didn't know what I was supposed to. I just stood there in front of the people like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Isn't that wild that they still do those types of things
Yeah.
to students? And what's crazy now is we have this administration who's actually attacking the amount of food that we could give to our students right now. And I find this so ironic because I live in the salad bowl, right?
Yeah.
Yet our students don't have access to the very produce that their parents are picking. It is so expensive. It is so hard for them to get nutritious food, not microwavable food that has a bunch of preservatives in them. Because even within our community, we have a high rate of diabetes. And if we're not teaching people about nutrition early on, they're going to keep making these bad habits that is going to lead them to making these bad choices and what they're putting into their body. So I think the schools need to come back to how are we going to survive when we graduate? Because we don't teach home ec anymore. So we have students that are graduating and not knowing how to cook their own meals, right? Or to get a credit card, right? They're just going off and getting these things. We're not even teaching, budgetary literacy in schools anymore. And these are the things that matter to our students. So I think we need a whole rehaul of our education system.
I completely agree. I remember having mock UN classes. We had a US government class that actually you got to pretend to role play as a government person to learn how it worked, right? And we had a whole class. I mean, just one semester, right? So it wasn't a big deal, but here's how you manage a checkbook and here's what your bank account looks like. And we've I don't want to say we lost it because that makes it seem like it was it's a mystery. It was defunded. That's what happened, right? These programs were cut. And this has a very specific agenda. And I don't want to get too far afield into alternate power and stuff like that because we definitely could.
We could go there, yeah.
And especially
I'm from a slightly older generation. We had no financial literacy classes or anything like that. It was just like the basics, math, English, history, science, and that was it. But what the schools have to offer now is far more involved than when I went through. And I'm sorry that some of the classes that you had are no longer being offered. But keeping in mind what we have today is so much better than the system was in the 50s, 60s, at least in the cities in the Northeast where I lived.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's generally speaking the case that education standards and the process of it has risen across the country. I know the loss of classes and things like that, it's a weird kind of time because I think humans generally don't follow linear time correctly. But remember, like there was a time, we call it the 90s, where things were okay, where we had money in the system and that we were funding education and we weren't at war with people. I don't want to get off on that, but we were investing more directly into like our country, our infrastructure, our kids, and our future. Things changed and we stopped doing that. Of course, we all, I think, are aware of what happened, and we don't need to dwell on that. But the shift in our country, it's a very curious thing because it will shift quickly, but the trickle down for us takes some time to get here. So yeah, they stopped funding for the schools, but the schools still have money for the year, so we won't feel it until next year. And then next year, it's like, well, what's happened? We don't remember that it was they cut it off this year, right? So that gap creates this sort of like mystery, like we don't remember what occurred. But this is a very deliberate program. And one of the ways we fix that, of course, is to roll back these changes. We can easily see, well, they cut this program, let's refund this program. To get to a brass tacks question, though, almost always, when I was running for office, no matter what I said, and the people would agree, like, yeah, that's brilliant. That's a great idea. How are you going to pay for it? And that was always the question. So that's my question to the two of you, because I'm sure you were given the same question. Like, how do you plan to pay for this great thing you're talking about? So David, what was your answer to it? I know you gave us some about like the firehouse, you found alternate fundings, but like, what did you say to people when they were pushing back against you about like, I'm not going to support you because you can't pay for it?
We found a long-term financing through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They have a department specifically called Rural Community Development. And our community felt within their purview. In fact, they had an office like just a mile outside the village limits. So we went to them. It was like a 30 or 40-year loan at interest rates that were below market rate. So and it was a doable deal. I mean, we had a plan in place. This is how we were going to pay for it. The reason we kept getting all the referendums voted down was because the total cost was too high. And so we had to keep cutting back and cutting back and cutting back. And we ended up with a usable service, a usable station, something the guys were thrilled with because they had all their apparatus in one station rather than two. They had more than enough room to expand the number of lockers for the fire department, for the fighters. Wasn't what they were hoping for, but it more than met their needs. And so they were happy with it. And we are one of the local fire departments still that is still recruiting new members. And we have a junior member program for kids that are barely entering their teens. And some of the work that needed to be done was done after the station was built. The fire department did it on their own, using their own funds for it. So that was, like I said, the big thing, is how are we going to pay for it? I came up with a plan ahead of time. And then once we got to a point where the cost was reasonable, then we were able to go forward with it.
Well, thank you, David. And Gabe, how did you respond to those questions? I suspect when you started talking about adding transportation, you're like, oh my gosh, the cost of buses and drivers and all the things.
Yes. I got all those questions, right? And this is what I tell people. So most of our educational budgets are going towards staff pay, right? For faculty, staff. It's about 80 to 90% of the budget. That remaining 10% goes back into the schools. So one thing that we needed to do was the previous board did not know how to run a meeting, and they consistently racked up fees, just all these law fees that were contributing to our budget. So one thing that I came in is we need to understand the rules, and we do not need this lawyer here that's costing us about $3,000 a meeting that they're there. So we got to get rid of that. Second thing, our our district was over bloated with double positions, people doing the exact same work, and the communication was just down. So we reassessed all those positions to see which ones we could combine or which other tasks that we can move to other roles to free up some of the budget. So those were the two practical things that we did in order to get some more of the money that we needed. Now, when it comes to transportation, our bus fleet is about 20 years overdue on being renewed. It is a mess. They're breaking down. So I'm trying to foster more partnerships in the area, right? A lot of the times they would ask me, well, oh, that sounds really cool, but who's going to do that? How are we going to pay for it? We need to rely on our partnerships. We have so many community members that want to give back, whether they're a business owner, an artist. Let's open up our schools to the community so that way they could give us that shared knowledge that they have. And I think that's another way that we could save on money. When I came in, I noticed that the district just wanted to be the one to make it so they could brag about it, right? But in doing so, we're wasting so many resources when we have an organization that's doing that exact same thing. So we need to tap into those in order to save money. And also, how could we get students to contribute to the school, right? To their funds? Well, we're talking now, and I think this is going on across the US because of COVID. Everybody got a bump in COVID funding, and now that bump is depleting. So anybody who was hired on COVID funding is getting removed, and programs are getting cut back. But how are we going to sustain those programs that were so beneficial with that COVID funding? And how could students be involved with that? Well, if we're going to close down campuses, why don't we convert those into malls where students could create products and sell them and contribute to the things that they want, right? We're also are being mandated in California to create housing for our teachers right now. So it's crazy. School boards are now becoming property managers. And, you know, it's hard because now we need to focus on that, and that's taking away a lot of our time from education. So having a community group that could help us with that, so we're not paying attention towards what, you know, California is telling us and demanding of us, that's not educational, but instead having a group that could focus on one thing and another group that could focus on the other, where we could all meet. The big tensions that come up at a lot of board meetings is people don't feel like they're being heard or don't feel like they were being involved in the process. And that's something that I think we should open up to, because we could pay $60,000 for a consultant to come in and tell us exactly what the community knows. So I think we need to go with that approach. Go to the community, ask what their needs are first before we spend so much on these contracts that are absolutely not needed. And instead we could put those towards transportation or towards other things that our students need.
Can I follow up on a couple of things that
Yeah.
Gabe spoke
Yeah,
about?
please. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Dave.
you mentioned not you personally, but not knowing how to run a meeting. That's really important. Anybody who is considering running for office, you have to go to the meetings of that office you are interested in running for. To find out what that particular board is talking about. I mean, you maybe have some really great ideas and subjects that you want to talk about, but you need to know what's under discussion so you can know how to respond and add to that. But God forbid you run for a position like I did as mayor, and you get elected and you show up the first meeting to chair it. And if you don't know what to do, if you don't know how to chair it, you're going to look like a stinking fool. So you really need to go out. And then the other thing Gabe mentioned, oh, what the heck was it? Oh, communication. When we got a request from a community member who wanted information or opinion on something, and I had to tell them, well, sorry, no, that's not going to work, or I disagree with you. I would try and find something positive to say to them at the same time. So they would see that there's a real dialogue going on, that I was understanding what they were saying, and I was trying to find a way to compromise with them. That's really a really important thing to do as well. Over.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I was gonna take us to that segment of our questions next, I guess. So,
I did it again.
so then let me take us to a different area for some conversation. So that is a device for people who are seeking office. And that's very good advice because yeah, you're right. You don't want to not know what you're doing if you get elected to the
Exactly.
position, right? That's going to not work out great. You probably won't win re-election. So I'm going to ask both of you then, when you were preparing for your race, and you realized that it was a serious effort that you were going to make, did you get a campaign team? Did you get a campaign manager, like and what did you do to find those people? Were they friends? Were they people you knew for the party? Like that whole process. So David, let me start with you on that one, and then we'll go to Gabe.
I had no team, it was just me. But I did call a meeting about a month or so, maybe 2 months before the election. And about 30 good friends of mine showed up in our living room who were very encouraged. We were able to raise some money from them. I got a couple $100 from the Green Party of New York to help out as well. But it's such a small community. I didn't see really a need for a team or a campaign manager or anything like that. I just handled everything myself.
Gotcha. And Gabe, how was your campaign? Was it the same?
I had a team. So my good friend who was studying at Columbia, she was like on break, and I was like, "Hey, you know how I am with graphics and media, like that is my thing. Right? I'm a documentary narrative film producer, so I want to contribute that to the campaign, but I need somebody to tell me." Gabe, we need you to focus on this. Gabe, I need you to do this. Because my direction was really being pulled in so many different directions by what the constituents needed. And having somebody there to really manage my time, to let me know, like, hey, this is coming up, that was great. And then also just being able to coordinate volunteers was fantastic. With my campaign manager, she was able to go out there to get volunteers, to get me to message and talk to students, to get them to come and volunteer. So I thought it was really great to have that. Could I have done it on my own? Yes. Was I terrified to do it on my own? Yes. So I felt like my campaign manager was not only that, but my like emotional support that I needed, because you go out hoping that everybody's going to love your message, that you just want to do good for everybody, but you're going to get those moments or those people that are really going to challenge your views. And sometimes it really takes a toll on you emotionally, psychologically. And I thought it was really good to have those people there to just talk these things out, because when you're going against a Republican that hits under the belt, you need that space and that group to have those discussion with, and not be impulsive like I am and like, I'm going to go to Twitter right now to tell them off. And no, I had to run it by my campaign manager to really filter it and, convert it to a more diplomatic message than something that I would do as an activist.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind too that the campaign for our election was very brief. We had to turn in the petitions by mid to late January, and then the election was held in mid-April. So it's basically like a month and a half of active campaigning time. So it's very short, very brief. That's it.
Gotcha.
Oh,
How long
and
was
the
your
other thing
campaign?
too, Gabe, yeah, and whenever I went out petitioning, I never went by myself. I always had somebody else to go with me just for moral support.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's important.
And it was really interesting because my family grew up in this entire area. So when I would go knocking on houses, I would meet some of my mom's friends and they would just talk to me about my mom when she was in high school. So, and they're like, I remember when your mom was pregnant with you. Like, oh my gosh, you're her son. And yeah, because my mom was actually denied walking on stage because she got pregnant in middle school. So they didn't want to let her walk. So she actually put on her gown, walked up there, got her diploma, and said, nobody's going to tell me or my child what to do. And I think that's where she started like getting this little activist growing in her belly. So I definitely carry that over.
Excellent. Okay, so we've had a pretty wide-ranging discussion about like a fair few topics tonight. And I feel like we have had a sense of like what it takes to sort of get motivated to run for a campaign, like on an individual level, some of the challenges that you faced and some of the positions which you've advocated for. So I want to switch our conversation to a slightly different area for a moment. And I want to ask you about, we just touched on it with campaign teams, but I want to ask about it in a different sense. So as a candidate, Gabriel, you were saying you ran in a space where a lot of people knew your mom and knew you before you were running like already. So did you find that you had a bunch of support from friends and family for your campaign, or were you kind of outside the friends and family and doing it despite them?
I mean, luckily I was born and raised in this community that I ran for this seat. So a lot of people, I had name recognition because I was always that vocal kid, like, no, this isn't right. So I had a little bit of name recognition. And, you know, I'm Mexican. We have a huge family. Once you tell one, it just spreads, right? So that was also really helpful to have my own, you know, it was really cool because my family isn't really into politics, but as soon as I ran, they started really seeing you know, just what the duopoly looked like, what we were facing and my campaign was facing as I was going off and the smearing, the messaging that was going on. And they were able to really see like, whoa, politics is kind of crazy. And I said, oh yeah, it really is. But just having that support, being somebody who was always involved with the community. I did a lot of marches. I was you know, I did education prior. I'm a professor at the local community college. So a lot of people know me and know that I've always been standing up for arts education. And I think that really helped my campaign. And, you know, I thought I would struggle with funding as well. But, you know, $5 went a long way from, you know, hundreds of people that I was able to buy my signs and put them up and all that good stuff.
You had mentioned like 2 environmental disasters recently that basically soured, I guess, the populace towards the Democrats altogether.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering if it, in your opinion, do you think that that was a motivating factor for people being willing to listen to a third-party message?
I think so. And then just connecting it to the bigger picture, because again, I come from an area where we have no infrastructure built in. So that was another thing that I said, like, yeah, the levee did breach. But even aside from that, why don't we have efficient roads? Why don't we have bus stops in walking distance from our community, right? Why can't we have organizations come over here and build? We still have buildings that have been, you know, inflamed with fire that are still there. Nothing has been done with them. So just speaking to those bigger issues, as you know, a Latino, a Chicano, who they could understand because they're just so used to people coming around for years, making these big promises that never get achieved. And I think that they knew that I was in the area, that they could just knock on my door, you know, like, yo, Gabe, you said you're going to do this. Why aren't you doing it? So I think that was a little cool with accountability. But yeah, they really liked the connection that I had, that I was familiar, that I knew the community, and that I could really speak to not only issues that are going on in our community, but what are issues impacting us at a much bigger level that are coming down to our community that we should be discussing.
I think that's a great point that you make about being accountable to your constituents, right? In a very real way. And David, when you were running, like y'all were running on a very specific open government, we're going to be accountable kind of thing. I think that's a thing that Americans want. I think the voters want people to be honest with them. Like, don't promise things you can't deliver. We understand, you know, that you can't do everything. but be honest with us and be accountable. When there is a problem, talk to us, tell us why. Like, oh, this funding, this issue, whatever it is, like we're generally speaking smart folks and we can understand a complicated process once it's told to us. It's the keeping it secret or obfuscating it.
Yep.
And it makes it feel it not even like it to me, not even just like it's a backdoor deal, but it feels immoral and unethical, because otherwise, why wouldn't you just do it in open meeting? Right? Like you must recognize there's something not quite up to snuff about it. And so I think that when I run, when I talk to people, that's one of the big things I stress a bunch, right? In the Green Party, of course, we're grassroots. That to me means we're accountable. That's exactly what accountability is. I'm at the grassroots of my community. So I go to lunch and I expect people to talk to me at lunch. If I'm doing something wrong, I'd like to eat my lunch, please, thank you. But also, talk to me, say the words. And I think that we live in a society now where it becomes politically charged in some cases to speak about issues we're passionate about, especially if we are anticipating some kind of pushback. As we know right now, so I'm going to kind of personalize this discussion for a second. There is a huge effort through the federal government to penalize trans kids and LGBTQIA plus individuals in general all across society. This manifests itself in unique ways, of course, in every institution, but in the education institution, this has a particular form that it takes, right? We see places like Florida, for instance, mandating that if a kid says to their teacher, hey, I would like to be addressed by this name, the teacher has to report that. We know, I think we're all adult enough to know this, that some kids don't have good home lives. And if you are in a situation where that home life is a compromised space and your teachers are mandated to tell things about you which you're keeping private, this isn't a good outcome for students.
Sure.
It never could be. And so I wonder, on an individual level, like Gabe, what would you advocate for to like protect the queer kids in school to make sure that they get the fair shake?
Oh gosh, the incumbent that I was running against, he literally called the superintendent and said, why is there a gay meeting happening at my elementary school? And this was a GSA for kids, right? And as somebody who's a part of the community, I've always had, because I grew up in a very machismo household. I couldn't show any sign of femininity or anything that would trigger my dad, who was a huge machismo. And I knew that I was a lot more comfortable at school than I was at home. I was surrounded by teachers who understood me. I was a part of GSA, right? A safe space, the only space that I could go to. So I think those are things that we do need to protect. And to go after students who just want to feel a sense of community, who just want to be treated like others, I'm one that is always going to protect our students, because these are just students that are just trying to have an experience, and to come in and say, no, you can't do X because we don't see you as you see yourself. That doesn't sit well with me. And also too, I always have to stress this to people. When we look at the trans community, you have to know that not only the household, if they have one, we have a lot of trans students who are homeless. And how are we supporting them? Right now, a lot of us are given this mandate, like I mentioned earlier, about getting housing for teachers. I'm literally arguing with people to shave out 2 or 3 units for our homeless youth who don't have access like that. And I'm getting so much pushback just on that. Right. And I said, this doesn't help our community. It shows that we don't care. Right. Especially when it's our trans students who are being directly impacted. Right. Because they come from a family that doesn't see them for what they are, but they're seeing them for who they think they should be. So I'm constantly standing up for that. I'm really happy that our next student board trustee is super active in that community. And I'm going to have some support on the board now from a student perspective, who's going to be able to advocate, because it isn't until we get those voices on front of a mic that people feel a connection to them. If you're just talking about somebody just you know, off screen all the time, you're not going to have that sense that this person, you know, is going through stuff like we are, despite this label that we're putting on them. So I try humanizing everybody as much as we can and getting them to come to meetings and speak, because I think that's powerful when their voices there to talk to the community, to show people that you aren't those things that people are saying you are.
You know, it reminds me a bit of how you were mentioning earlier that your family wasn't really involved in politics at all. Like they were just like, whatever, until you got involved, until they knew somebody in politics, right? And then it was like, oh, let me get aware of the issues. Let me get on board with it. And I think that's the same thing with queer kids. Like if you don't know any, then, you know, it's an abstract. And yeah, sure, you want equity and equality, whatever, but it's not connected personally. When you meet them and you hear stories, right, it does get connected and it is personal and it does produce a different kind of motivational effort. David, I know you're not in the mayoral role currently, of course, and it was a different time when you were. So the prospects of, you know, like queer kids in school, that isn't new by any means. And so I'm wondering, like when you were there, did you face any particular challenges towards accommodating queer kids? Were there any particular issues that arose in that school district towards them?
No, the students were surprisingly welcoming to anybody who was queer. And in fact, the homecoming queen one year was a woman. I mean, a gay woman, sorry, I phrased that wrong. You know, and in fact, my vice mayor during most of my time in office was a lesbian as well. So our community was very accommodating, very supportive of that. There are, for a village of, like I say, less than 2,000 people, there are a surprising number of gay couples that chose to move here because of the atmosphere that was here. And I've heard stories that, you know, back in the 50s and early 60s, there was a gay bar in Main Street, which would have been just unheard of in so many communities. So Greenwich is this little place that's really different from a lot of the rest of America. But yeah, it's and there, I don't know if it still exists, but maybe not. But I know a couple of years ago, there was a gay club that started at the high school. And I donated some artwork for their first auction they had. Haven't heard back from them, but that might be because the young woman that pushed for it graduated. So I don't know if it's still in existence or not, but like I say, it's been a very welcoming community for anybody who's different.
Yeah, we actually have our drama class. They put on a show called What's in a Name, and it's put on and it's skits about what you know, LGBTQIA plus students go through, and that was actually done because back, I think it was the late 90s, there was a student who was being bullied so much because they were gay that they took their own life. So in response to that, that's where we had this What's in the Name play come on to really show people, right? I remember I was a part of a skit where I had two moms and they were really upset because I was straight, right? And we were just switching the roles just to show people like, no, you don't need to be scared of this. Like they're trying to make you scared of, and you're not going to catch it, right? That's another thing that I had to do a lot of. This is not something that is a choice. It is something that you were born with. That attraction is something that is with you from a very early age. And I knew those feelings when I was in kindergarten, right? I wasn't putting sand in the girls' pants. I was putting in the guys' pants, right? Because I wanted their attention. So I think just letting, you know, students, don't penalize them for having these questions, because that's what I encountered when I started asking, like, why do I feel this way, right? And they were trying to frame it back like you shouldn't. Now I'm glad like millennials are starting to say like, no, we're gonna let people be who they want to be. And you don't need to know what's going on in our lives, just like we don't want to know what's going on in your lives every second, every day. And we're not going to make any policies to punish you for doing those things that you like doing.
As
And
they
as
say,
an-
catch these,
and
catch
as an
this freedom or
aside-
catch these hands.
Exactly.
As an aside, because most of the people here are from the West Coast, I want to make sure you all are aware that the whole issue of gay marriage was pushed to the forefront by a Green Party mayor in New Paltz, New York, who,
Yes.
against New York state law, married 8 to 10 or more couples on the New Paltz city property. And then he was charged and all this kind of stuff, all charged, but that was really the event that pushed gay marriage prominently throughout the country. And that's something as Greens, especially Green office holders, we have to be especially proud of. Jason West was his name.
So I think we're getting close to the end of our conversation for tonight, and I have one last follow-up question for both of you, and then we'll take some questions. If there's any Q&A from the audience tonight, we'll ask some of them what to give us one of their questions. So my last question for both of you, so we've talked about like how your families were with your run, like how friends were, like the kind of challenges you faced, the issues that you brought to the constituents to like run your campaign, if you had a team behind you. And so my last question then is perhaps a bit more like personal, and please feel free to elaborate, but there must have been in each campaign an issue which was like the biggest problem that you faced during it, like the biggest opponent, the biggest challenge, the one thing that was hard to overcome. And I want to ask about that, but I want to ask you in this way, like from a perspective outside of your own campaign. If you were looking in at your thing and you saw this hard issue that you had to take, what advice would you give to yourself now that you didn't have at the time because, well, experience? So what would you tell yourself now about your campaign to have made your campaign better, easier, overcome the obstacle that you faced? David, you want to start us with that one?
Oh boy, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I'm going to punt for now.
Okay.
I would say one thing that I wish I had done more was get to understand why somebody would be against that platform or against that position. And before making a solid position on something that you want to do, get perspective. And that's one thing that I wish I had done more, because we do need to reach out to the other side to work with them. As hard as it is for me to, just want to say like, oh, I can't work with Republicans because we just don't get along. Well, there are some things that we do get along with, and I will work with people on those things, especially if it's going to help my constituents. But I will not falter on these other positions. So I tell people, learn the two sides to what you want to do. Learn the good and learn the bad. That way, when you're crafting this and when you're going out there to speak about it, you're not caught off guard by that question, because it is going to come up. And the platform that you think is the one that nobody's going to have anything to say on is probably going to be the one that most people have something to say on. So just find that balance in knowing why you're doing it and why some people would be against it, because that is just information that's going to help your campaign.
Okay,
Gotcha.
I'm ready to answer.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Again, going back to the fire department. I met with the fire department under one of their weekly normal meetings, mainly to listen to them, but also to outline what my intentions were and how we could go about getting a new firehouse. I didn't explain myself clearly enough. And so we ended up with a firehouse and not where we all thought it was going to be. A couple of the members accused me of being a liar, and just as typical run-of-the-mill politician. I just wasn't clear enough. I know that's the biggest mistake I made. So
Gotcha. It is interesting how voters will really remember exactly what you say. I don't even remember what I had for breakfast. And this person's like, at that meeting 2 months ago, you said
Yeah.
exactly this. I'm like, okay,
That's why
well,
I'm very careful now. Like, I have to make sure I review meetings sometimes just to make sure. Okay, yes, that was my point. Let me bring that to the next meeting.
Yep.
and let me go ahead and open our conversation here to Scott, one of our co-hosts for tonight. And I see you got your hand up, Scott.
Oh, great.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Hi. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you, Gabe and David. I have a question a little bit different, not about being a candidate and office holder, but about your relationship as both as a candidate and as an office holder, both with your local chapter and your state party. And if there are characteristics or things that our local chapters and our state party can keep in mind as they recruit and support candidates who then hopefully become office holders and keep a long-term relationship with them. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You want
Let's
to take
start
that
with
one?
you. Yeah, David, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll
And
go
then,
first. Yeah.
yeah.
At the time, Scott, there was no local party. Even in Glens Falls, which is just a few miles up the road, there wasn't at that point no organized Green party. There was one in Albany, but that's 45 minutes away, so there was no real connection there. But I was elected in 2008. The following year, two of the villages just across the Hudson River, one elected a Green Party mayor and the other one elected a Green Party trustee. So just because you live in a small rural area in these small villages of 2,000 or less does not mean that you cannot, that means you can still run as a Green, as a principal Green, and get elected. At this type of local level, people really aren't super interested in your political party as to what you're actually running on and what you're proposing. And just as a follow-up for that real quick, and then I'll be off. It was my intention, Scott, when I ran, was to try and use my position to create a local Green Party. After about 2 months, I realized that was wrong. I needed to do the best possible job I could as mayor. That would do more to build respect for the Green Party than trying to use my office to create a local branch. Over.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I would say when I started running, I definitely reached out to our local party. Well, first, I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to run as a Democrat. Like I really don't want to do that. I voted against them almost every election. But this is the choice that some people make because there is funding if you are going to run as a Democrat, right? So I know that was something. But I think I was lucky. I had the Monterey chapter that we have here, and Sean Doherty had just ran his campaign against Jimmy Panetta. So I was like, whoo, okay, there's a really great support system. I reached out to Sean. He was really excited, and he was like, wait, how do you know about me? And I'm like, dude, you're awesome. Like, what do you mean? Because I've never seen anybody like stand up to the Dems in our area. So that gave me motivation. And with that, just the people make the chapters, right? And I felt so welcomed, and I got more involved. I went to go, I built up the state chapter by kind of giving my media perspective. I helped them like finalize their marketing, how they're putting out material, because that's one thing that I felt like we needed to do a better job on. My campaign, I was always online. I was making videos. I was talking to people. I wasn't making them come meet me. I was trying to meet them where I could, especially within the digital space, because it's so accessible. And I think that really helped. So that's something that I'm trying to get the local chapters to model, as well as our state chapter in California. And I'm also a part of the Latinx caucus. So I'm trying to get everybody more modernized with, we just need presence. People just want to see us out there, right? Whether it's a short clip that's less than a minute or a photo, just put yourself out there so they can know that we're engaged. Because a lot of times people say, where are the Greens at? Where are the Greens at? And it's like, no, we're here. You know, we're just not telling everybody we're green because we're doing our work and getting the job done. That's the difference. So you won't hear us saying that, but we are doing the job.
Well said.
Yeah, that's right on. I think it's important to understand too, as David was talking about, that our elected positions are that, right? They're not really vehicles to drive building the Green Party. It's something different than that. It does lend respect. I mean, obviously, if we show up and do the work and we demonstrate we know how to do it. And I think this is one of the things that really so let me step back for one quick second. Maybe this is a thing that some state parties have. I'm not really sure, but like a shadow government, right, where you sort of elect people to, like, if you were in office, what would you do in this situation? That kind of thing. And when we can elaborate that, or we can talk about that, it shows people in a real way what the alternative is, and they don't have to imagine it. We can articulate it ourselves, right? We can, like right now, of course, you know, we're in a pretty dire situation here in the United States with our education funding. So we can articulate that. We can say it. We don't have to beat around the bush. We can say we can fund our education if we increase taxes on the wealthy, if we change the system of funding, right? There are concrete, tangible solutions that we can articulate. And when we do, people respond to that. And I think, Gabe, you were kind of maybe not intentionally, but you really brought up a very big, I think, split in exactly how we go about doing this. As you were mentioning, you live online, essentially. So do I. And that is a space where I meet people and talk to them. That is a different space than meet space in the IRL world. And those meeting people in those two different spaces are different and useful. And I know that sometimes in the party, there is a tension between the let's go knock on doors and let's do social media engagement, right? And there's a push-pull in that regard. I think we should do both, right? People find their strength, their talent at it, and then they should just lean into that. As a organization, we should help channel that, right? If you're good at media, then let's help you do media, right? If you're good at knocking doors, let's help you knock doors. I think that as a small party, we have to use every tool at our advantage. And as a consequence, online spaces are fantastic for it. Like David, you were talking, your local party, the closest to you is 45 minutes away. So it would take you double the amount of time to get there and back for the meeting. That's not going to incentivize volunteers to go. It simply won't. I've done volunteer work way too long to understand. I know this, and so do you. We all do. And so having online meetings, hybrid meetings, is the way to go. You can include more people. Like tonight, we have people from other states here. If this was an in-person meeting, it would never happen. And so we have to be cognizant as Greens that because we're small, and I kind of dislike programming terms in this way, but we can be agile, right? We can shift easily and move collectively as a group because we're a small group, and we can embrace new technologies and new approaches simply for that. And I know that, like, again, we've had a ranging conversation about things like how we be candidates, supporting the Green Party, supporting our friends and family, all this kind of stuff like that. And so I want to give you both an opportunity to sort of send us off with a motivational perspective. So if let's say here's the scenario. I'm coming to you because I know you've won an office or you're in office, and I'm saying to you, convince me to run as a Green. Like, I'm going to run, but convince me to run as a Green. David, give me your pitch.
You need to initially, well, first of all, you have to understand that at the local level, what you need is a common sense and a sense of morality. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a millionaire. But what you also need to do is go to the meetings ahead of time to see what's going on and figure out if you're going to be comfortable there or not. Many municipalities have volunteer boards. You know, they say the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, or boards that may deal with environment, like tree issues or something like that. Maybe get involved with something like that. You know, go serve on your local library board, or the local Chamber of Commerce or something like that. See if you're comfortable in a small meeting environment, discussing issues and talking about it and conducting and casting votes with your neighbors. If you are, then you can move up and look at actually running for a political office. You need to get your feet wet at a lower level than running for political office, I think. At least that's what I did. Over.
Gotcha. Thank you, David. And Gabe, what would you tell me to convince me to run for office as a Green?
Yeah, well, I would say you should run as a Green because if you run as a Democrat, your amazing ideas that you have to make this world better are probably going to be compromised, shut down, because you haven't proved yourself yet to the Democratic establishment. So those ideas and that passion that you have isn't going to go very far. So you need to join a party that is going to give you that leverage, that understands not all localities are the same. They're different, they're unique. And that is the beauty about the Green Party is we're not censored, that people listen to us because we're the experts in our own communities, in our own localities. And that's why we need more ordinary people from these places to run like yourself. We need your voice. I hope I convinced you.
You did.
Good. Yeah, there you go.
I did run in my own local race in 23. I ran for Seattle City Council. My opponents outspent me by about $500,000. So I did not prevail, but I did a good showing for my first run. And David, I take your point well about that. A lower level office. City Council isn't a very low level per se. It is lower, of course, in state Congress or something like that. But, you know, and I take your point well, Gabe, about, yeah, each area is unique. One of the things we talk about here in Washington a bunch, so we have a population of orcas. They don't exist anywhere else in our country. It's a really big deal. If I'm going to be 100% honest with you, one of the things that drove me from getting off the bench, besides Jill's fantastic campaign, was saving the orcas, very specifically bringing Taquete back from SeaWorld here to repatriate her with her family. Each one of the orcas, if y'all don't know, is a family. Like their pods are families, and they're all named. We know all of them. They're all here. They have rights of nature protected citizenship here in Washington. So we treat them as individual beings. And this is a pretty unique thing. And each of our areas has this stuff, right? We have these massive salmon spawning rivers like the Columbia River, which had been dammed for so long. Many of our salmon streams have been. We have gone through a program here of, what's it, undamming? I think maybe they call it that. I'm not sure. It's a funny name, but anyway, removing the dams from the river and restoring the natural stream flows. And as a consequence, we've seen just in 1 year, the salmon have returned all the way back to their ancient spawning grounds that have been dammed up for more than 75 years. So it works, right? Restoring nature back to its state works. One of the things you were talking about the floods that broke the levee there, and, we're looking at the Midwest right now, and a massive continuous flood is going on. And it largely is because humans decided that we could shape the Mississippi River and just make it do what we wanted instead of living around it, doing what it wanted. And I think that's the ultimate hubris of humanity right there. We can just force nature to our will when this is not the case. If you live around a volcano and that volcano is exploding, you will leave, or not, I suppose, but you can't control it. You can't fix it, right? There's none of that. We have to accommodate ourselves to nature and live. And I hate to be appropriative here, and I don't mean to be, but I mean to say we need to live more in harmony with our natural surroundings the way indigenous peoples of our past have and continue to still do so. It's a lesson that we've lost.
I was going to say, I practice Nahua philosophy a lot. And one of the things that we really think about is energy, right? Where we're putting our energy. And in Nahua, they have this saying that we eat them and they eat us, right? When we cater and fertilize the land, it is going to replenish us, right? And we're going to eat it. And then soon enough, we're going to go into the ground as well, and we're going to replenish the earth. And it's this beautiful thing that I think we need to get back to, because right now we're teaching students like environment could be destroyed. It's just a tree, it's just a flower, right? But when we think about it through an indigenous perspective, that tree had to grow just like we had to grow. That tree is producing something for us that we may not see, but we need, right? It's going back to respecting, right? And bringing back a little bit of animism, right? Because I feel like trees, plants, they all have this energy. And their ruling guide was really, you know, we don't care what happens in the afterlife. We want to fix things right now, right here. We want to be present. We want to take care of the land. And when I was doing my studies, one thing that the Mexica told the Spanish is, your downfall will be that you do not give back, because all you have done is taken from this land and you have not given back, and the earth will then consume you. So they gave that message, and look at where we're at now. Floods, tornadoes, environmental disasters, right? We lost that connection. And I think that's something that we should be bringing back, especially into our school systems.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as Greens, we have an opportunity to do so in a way which is within the political like system and outside it at the same time, because we're a third party and we operate very differently than the duopoly, right? So we do get to do a very unique kind of thing. So I want to go ahead and bring us to close for tonight. And, you know, I'm really appreciative that we all had a chance to be here together in this space. As we probably all aware right now, the United States has engaged in what will undoubtedly be another war, and it is going to have very deleterious effects, primarily on our kids, right?
Yep.
Like if you are a young person right now, and I hate to say, like, these words coming out of my mouth make me feel very deeply offended and disgusted, but you're probably looking at a draft, and you're probably going to be drafted into this war. And I am disgusted by it, as we all are. And yet we know that this is the inevitable outcome of late stage capitalism and its absolute inability to tolerate any other forms of expression or government outside the core of the empire. We live in it. We're at the heart of the materialist empire in our world. And for some folks, that is not a very comfortable position to be in. I personally am like, wow, I'm in the heart of the, I couldn't imagine a better place to fight the system, right? But we have to understand that we're very much underdogs here. So all of our wins are very important. Our community is very important. And I think that our efforts, consequently, as the only anti-war electoral party in this country on the left, we have a moral obligation. If we truly believe in anti-war, this is a moment, just like it was back in the start of the Iraq War. Some of you are old enough to have been in the Green Party then, but there was a federal document released about like potential threat actors in the United States that were anti-war, one of which was Code Pink, and one of which was the Green Party. So we were listed as a potential disruptor of anti-war stuff. And I like that about us. I think we should disrupt war plans. I think we should protest that. I believe in us as a species, as a nation that goes forward collectively with moral and ethical responsibility to ourselves, to others around us. It seems to me the basic way to be in the world. Gabriel, as you were saying before, it's, and I'm going to paraphrase this, RESPECT. Find out what it means to me.
Yes.
And it's respect. It's respect for ourselves, respect for our environment, respect for others, respect for the process. And I think if we can engage in that, we're going to be able to change our world for the better. It's hard. And there's a lot of big money against us. You know, just to put not too fine a point on it, but Michael Bloomberg ran in 2020 and spent $1 billion and did not even win the Democratic primary. So when we're talking that kind of money, it's just mind-boggling. Here in my own race, I'm in a local city council race, and we're capped on spending here. There's an actual spending cap, and both my opponents spent right to the cap max in both sessions of the race. It was over $1 million. There has never been a city council race in my city that was that expensive. And now all of them are, because the money is just there. And we're in it. That's the truth of it. When we want to win, we don't win with money, we win with big voice. And we get big voice by connecting with people, with our communities and our constituents. When they lend their voice to us, we speak powerfully. Our opponents speak powerfully because they have big money, and big money amplifies their voice in a different way. So that's the singular challenge we face. I'm grateful for your efforts, David, for running as mayor and engaging in that community process. And of course, in the Green Party ever since. The National Party would not be the same without you, no doubt about it. And Gabriel,
you.
You have led the way here in California in an educational sense, and you're blazing a trail for your state party and a clear path for others to follow going forward. I think those are very, very good things. The two of you, in a sense, represent two very different phases of the Green Party, where we have come from and where we're going, and how we got from there to here. And as a small group, it's really important that we remember our history, like especially with things like the first gay marriages in the country. That was a generational changing thing. It changed our entire country, and it was a Green mayor who did it, and went to jail for it. These efforts are significant and sincere. And as a person standing here many years removed from all that stuff, I'm grateful. For all that effort. I stand proudly on the historic accomplishments of my peers and colleagues in the party and advocate for them, and hope that when my time is done here,